billionaire husband's affair exposed during a weekend cruise when pregnant wife overhears. Their conversation secrets find a way to unravel themselves in the unlikeliest of places. For Charlotte Donovan, that place was the gleaming deck of a Royal Caribbean cruise, where the sway of the ocean and the embrace of the sunset concealed the greatest betrayal of her life. Beneath the veneer of her billionaire husband, Frederick's carefully curated charm, a hidden life begged to be discovered. Charlotte, newly pregnant and longing for a romantic weekend, never imagined she would stumble upon whispered confessions in the hush of the evening sea breeze. This is a story of heartbreak, confrontation, and the unstoppable momentum of destiny. Charlotte Donovan was not always married to a billionaire. In fact, only 3 years earlier, she had been working as a marketing associate for a mid-sized tech company, living a modest yet content life. She came from a caring middle-class family in Baltimore, whose only wish was for her to remain safe and happy in whatever path she chose. She was the kind of person who could find joy in the simplest of moments, the earthy smell of the first spring rain, the feel of a well-worn paperback in her hands, or the excitement of volunteering at animal shelters on weekends. Her life had taken a spectacular turn the day Frederick Donovan, head of the formidable Donovan Holdings, set eyes on her during a corporate fundraising event. Frederick had been one of the major donors, strolling through the venue in a custom-tailored suit, gold cufflinks glinting in the overhead lights, a confident smile on his face. At 35, he was already a legend among entrepreneurs. Magazines hailed him as a genius, a risk-taker, a man whose golden touch had turned small ventures into multinational successes. Women flocked to him, men envied him, and the media chased him for even the slightest glimpse of his personal life. Charlotte never imagined she would become the woman Frederick singled out that night. She remembered the moment as if it were a dream. Someone had bumped her elbow, causing her drink to spill down her dress. She had gasped, searching in her purse for a napkin. But then there he was, Frederick Donovan, offering his embroidered handkerchief as if it were the most natural thing in the world. His eyes were the color of uncut emeralds, steady and self-assured, betraying a faint curiosity in the woman who now blushed with embarrassment. A flash of recognition and attraction sparked between them. 1 week later, a bouquet of roses arrived at her office, and Frederick invited her to dinner. Their romance escalated with blazing speed. Within 6 months, Charlotte found herself whisked away to private islands, escorted to black tie events where she felt out of place but entirely enthralled. The quieter moments, however, were what truly captured her heart. Frederick carrying her high heels so she could walk barefoot along the shore of his Southampton mansion, or the evenings they spent cooking experimental dishes in her cramped apartment kitchen, neither wanting to let go of a simpler, more genuine life. When Frederick proposed, it was at an intimate family gathering rather than a public spectacle. It felt as if the entire universe had aligned in that moment for them both. Charlotte accepted, tears slipping down her face. She believed she had found the one man who could share her love of life, who could guide her yet, treat her as an equal, who could help her navigate the complexities of wealth without losing the essence of who she was. Marriage to Frederick was like stepping into an alternate reality. One day, Charlotte was driving a practical sedan through busy streets, bringing lunch in Tupperware to work. The next, she was attending grand galas alongside leaders of industry. She tried not to lose herself in the glamour, always remembering the values her family had instilled in her. Frederick encouraged her to maintain her own passions, philanthropy, reading, activism. At least, in the beginning, he appeared to love the genuine, down-to-earth woman she was, delighting in the innocence of her wide-eyed wonder when visiting lavish locations or meeting world figures. Yet, beneath the veneer of Frederick's polite smiles and philanthropic gestures, there were moments that made Charlotte pause. He was often away on business, traveling from Hong Kong to London, from Berlin to Dubai. The calls or messages came late, and sometimes they didn't come at all. Business deals were always urgent, always overshadowing any attempt at conversation. In her most concerned moments, she asked him if something was wrong. He would shrug off her questions with half smiles, assuring her that the financial world was ruthless and that it took every bit of his energy to keep Donovan Holdings afloat. Though Charlotte sensed a certain distance, she blamed it on the demands of his empire. He ran a global conglomerate, after all, and countless people depended on his leadership. She had faith in him, or perhaps it was a reluctance to face the possibility that beneath the polished exterior might lurk a man capable of betrayal. Frederick's affection when he was present overwhelmed any concerns she had. Flowers arrived unexpectedly at their penthouse. Weekend getaways were a constant delight. He sent her sweet texts whenever she had a big event or was volunteering somewhere, telling her he missed her. Their first year of marriage concluded in a sprawling anniversary event at Frederick's estate in the Hamptons. CEOs, fashion designers, celebrities, and prominent politicians all milled about, raising champagne glasses in a toast to the couple. Frederick's eyes glowed with pride as he waltzed Charlotte around the dance floor. That night, under twinkling string lights and a canopy of stars, she felt sure that her life was perfect. When Charlotte discovered she was pregnant, her joy felt like a blessing that surpassed any luxury wealth could buy. She broke the news to Frederick on a quiet Sunday morning in their penthouse kitchen, where the sunlight poured in through floor-to-ceiling windows. She had prepared a simple breakfast: pancakes, fruit, and his favorite coffee blend. Nervous yet excited, she set a small gift bag on the table. Inside, it was a tiny onesie that read "Daddy's Little Success Story," along with a positive pregnancy test tucked beneath it. Frederick's reaction was instant, a look of astonishment followed by laughter and tears as he swept her into his arms. For the first time in months, Charlotte felt the closeness she had feared was slipping away. Frederick cancelled his next business trip to Tokyo, insisting that he wanted to be by her side for every doctor's appointment. He told her he had never been more convinced that fate had brought them together. In the weeks following, Charlotte's life took on a gentle glow. She woke each day with renewed optimism, humming lullabies under her breath while cooking or reading. She decorated a small room next to their master bedroom, imagining it filled with baby books and plush teddy bears. Frederick indulged her every whim, from prenatal yoga classes to a visit to the best obstetrician in town. Their closest friends, and even Frederick's extended business associates, congratulated them. Charlotte's parents were over the moon, seeing their daughter step into a motherhood that promised to be full of blessings. Yet, amid the euphoria, a whisper of doubt lingered. Frederick was suddenly more attentive, yet also more guarded with his phone. Charlotte occasionally glimpsed him reading text messages and adopting a strained expression. When she approached, he'd lock his screen and slide his phone away. She tried to shake it off, reasoning that he had more than enough corporate secrets to protect. When Frederick announced that they would be taking a weekend cruise, it seemed like a dream come true. Charlotte was well into her second trimester, the stage where she had renewed energy, her morning sickness now a distant memory. Frederick insisted that this would be a well-deserved break for both of them. Plus, he reasoned, the calm, fresh sea breeze would do wonders for a woman carrying a baby. He made the arrangements personally, booking a luxurious suite aboard a Royal Caribbean ship that was making a special 3-day round trip from Miami to the Bahamas. Charlotte imagined strolling across sunlit decks, indulging in quiet dinners under the stars, and enjoying couples massages at the onboard spa. The suggestion felt wonderfully romantic, a promise of reconnection after months of Frederick's frantic business travel. 2 days before their departure, Frederick came home late in a flurry of phone calls. giving Charlotte only passing details. The trip was on, and they'd be leaving for Miami by private jet. Charlotte tried to ask him about the itinerary, but Frederick brushed off her questions with a weary smile. "I'll handle the details," he said. "Just rest and get ready. This trip is for us." A thrill of anticipation fluttered through her. She envisioned lazy days spent reading near the pool, exploring the Bahamas, and evenings filled with the hush of waves against the hull of the ship A. Perfect backdrop for love. This was exactly the reprieve they needed. On a bright Friday morning, Charlotte and Frederick arrived in Miami, stepping from their private jet into a sleek black car that whisked them to the port. The ship loomed in front of them, gleaming under the Florida sun. Crowds bustled, excited families and couples eagerly awaiting check-in. Frederick handed off their luggage to a porter and escorted Charlotte up the red-carpeted walkway. Cameras flashed here and there, as it was no secret that Frederick Donovan was a celebrity in the business world. Charlotte felt a pang of nerves, but kept a cool smile. Once they boarded, they were shown to the royal suite, a grand living space equipped with a balcony overlooking the ocean, a private whirlpool tub, and butler service. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a sweeping view of the sea. Charlotte's heart soared with gratitude. She turned to Frederick, ready to embrace him, but he excused himself to make some urgent calls. "I'll be right back," he murmured, giving her a quick peck on the cheek. "You relax, my love." Left alone, Charlotte began unpacking. She hung her maternity dresses in the closet, noting how they took up just a small portion of the massive space. Even though Frederick had insisted on bringing a second suitcase for baby items books on pregnancy, her comfortable pillows, a special herbal tea recommended by her doctor, some anxious thought told her something was off. She pushed the worry aside. After all, she was in the midst of a luxury cruise, ready for a romantic weekend. The first evening began as she had envisioned. They dined at a private table overlooking the sea, with a soft violin serenade in the background. Frederick spoke briefly about his work, about looming deals in Asia, and about future expansions. He seemed, if not completely at ease, at least calmer than usual. Charlotte held his hand across the table, wanting to believe that this gentle hush of the ocean breeze would repair the distance that had crept between them. Late that evening, after dinner, Charlotte felt unexpectedly lightheaded. The gentle rocking of the ship, combined with her pregnancy, made her feel slightly disoriented. Frederick helped her to their suite and suggested she lay down. She agreed, figuring rest would be best to ensure the next day's adventure was not marred by exhaustion. After an hour of fitful sleep, she awoke to find Frederick gone. Worried, she rose from the bed and stepped into the living area. The curtains billowed with the night breeze from the open balcony door, but Frederick was nowhere to be seen. She glanced at the clock. It was nearly midnight. Outside, the quiet deck was illuminated by moonlight. She slipped on a light robe and ventured into the hallway. The corridor was still, punctuated only by the distant hum of the ship's engines. Wondering if Frederick had gone to the lounge or was making some final phone calls, Charlotte walked toward the elevator. She had no idea that each step she took was leading her closer to the crack in her marriage, to the irrevocable truth she was about to discover. On the deck, she spotted Frederick standing in a quiet corner next to a tall, willowy woman with dark hair and a fitted black cocktail dress. The woman's posture was poised, and she seemed dangerously familiar in a way Charlotte could not immediately place. They stood close, almost intimately so, as if they shared some secret Charlotte wasn't privy to. She was about to call out to her husband when she saw the woman gently place a hand on Frederick's forearm. Charlotte froze, her heart pounding. She knew this tension, this posture, the subdued lighting turning two silhouettes into something conspiratorial. She hovered behind a large potted plant near the deck's railing, telling herself she had no reason not to trust Frederick. Yet a louder voice inside begged her to stay hidden for just a moment longer, to observe and perhaps quell the growing dread before confronting him. As Charlotte inched closer, the words drifted into her hearing, muted by the ocean wind. "You should have told her," the woman said, her tone an odd mix of softness and reproach. "It's not fair to keep me a secret, especially now that she's pregnant." Charlotte's mind reeled. The woman's voice was heartbreakingly familiar. Dahlia Gray. Dahlia was rumored to be a rising fashion designer who had recently collaborated with a high-end boutique on Fifth Avenue. Charlotte had met her once at a charity event. Dahlia had been introduced as a sponsor and had lingered near Frederick that evening, though Charlotte never suspected anything. Now, hearing Dahlia's voice in the hush of the deck, she felt a cold wave of betrayal creep up her spine. Frederick sighed. "This situation is complicated. You don't understand the stakes, Dahlia. I didn't mean for this to happen." Charlotte's stomach twisted, her intuition confirming the worst. She wanted to run, to confront them, to scream. Yet she stayed rooted in place, as if her feet had grown into the ship's deck. Each breath seemed to rob her of strength. "Then what are we doing here, Frederick?" Dahlia asked. "It's obvious you wanted to see me. We planned this, but you've barely looked at me. And now you're telling me there's no time. When will there be time?" Charlotte nearly doubled over, her mind racing. Frederick had invited Dahlia on the same cruise? Or had Dahlia booked it, and Frederick arranged to coincide? In that moment, Charlotte realized that everything her illusions, her fantasies of a perfect marriage, hung by a thread. She was on the verge of stepping forward to confront them when she heard Frederick's clipped tone. "Listen, Dahlia, I can't talk about this here. Let's meet tomorrow in that private lounge on deck 12. I'll handle Charlotte, keep her distracted. We'll figure something out." An icy terror shuddered through Charlotte's pregnant body. She felt a surge of dizziness. She had heard enough. Spinning on her heel, she returned to her suite, praying with every step that she wouldn't faint in the hallway. Once inside, she locked the door, hands trembling, tears sliding down her cheeks. She stared at her reflection in the mirror, seeing a woman who barely recognized herself, eyes puffy with shock and heartbreak, face drained of color. The night passed in a swirl of confusion and tears. Charlotte struggled to keep calm for the baby's sake, pressing her hand over her belly as she wept. The tiny life inside her deserved stability and love, yet the father who had professed his devotion was apparently orchestrating an affair behind her back. When she finally fell into a restless sleep, her mind bombarded her with nightmares of betrayal and illusions of a perfect marriage crumbling like fragile sandcastles. Morning arrived, bringing no solace. Frederick acted as though nothing was wrong, a bright smile on his face. He suggested a lavish breakfast in the suite. Charlotte, mouth dry and stomach clenched, forced a polite nod. She watched him eat, analyzing his every gesture, the twitch of his lips, the shift of his eyes, and wondered how she could have missed it. Was he always this good at lying? Or had she been blinded by love, ignoring the subtle signs? She thought about telling him right then and there. She pictured herself slamming her hand down on the table, demanding the truth, but a creeping fear of confrontation, combined with a determination to gather more concrete proof, stopped her. If she confronted him now, he could twist the narrative, deny any wrongdoing. Charlotte needed to know the details, how long this had been going on, how serious it was before. She decided how to protect herself and her unborn child. Suppressing her disgust, she allowed Frederick to brush a kiss across her forehead. He then informed her he had to attend a short meeting with an investor he happened to know on board. Charlotte nodded, forcing a weak smile. As soon as he left, she rushed into the bathroom, splashing cold water on her face to steady her trembling. She stood there for several minutes, leaning on the sink, telling herself to remain strong. She would find out everything, and she would decide her next move with all the facts at hand. Determined to confirm what she had overheard, Charlotte spent the day discreetly observing Frederick's habits. She roamed the ship's shops, ducking into corners when she thought she spotted Dahlia's unmistakable silhouette. Her heart pounded every time she caught sight of Frederick's tall figure moving through the corridors, checking his phone. Once, she almost collided with him near the elevator. He seemed startled but quickly covered it with a warm smile, tucking his phone away. "Are you all right?" he asked. "You look pale. Maybe you should rest." Charlotte forced a laugh. "I'm fine. Just a bit woozy. Must be the pregnancy." She touched her belly, a gentle reminder of her reason to stay level-headed. "I think I'll lie down for a bit, then maybe explore the spa." Frederick nodded. "Take it easy, darling. I'll see you tonight." They parted ways. That afternoon, Charlotte decided to treat herself to a prenatal massage, hoping to soothe her frazzled nerves. Lying face down on a specially designed table that accommodated her belly, she tried to quell the chaos in her mind. But the memory of Frederick's conversation with Dahlia kept replaying. By the time the session ended, her body felt slightly more relaxed, but her heart still pounded with unresolved questions. As evening approached, Charlotte recalled Frederick telling Dahlia he would meet her on Deck 12. Deck 12 was mostly private lounges, a few high-end bars, and a theatre for exclusive gatherings. It was not typically crowded, especially when the main events were happening on the lower decks. She decided to go there, to see if she could catch them together and confirm her suspicions for good. Wearing a loose-fitting black dress that concealed her pregnancy enough not to draw immediate attention, Charlotte slipped into the elevator and pressed the button for Deck 12. Her reflection in the stainless steel doors showed a woman readying herself for battle. She had no plan, but was fueled by heartbreak and the need for answers. When the doors opened, she entered a softly lit foyer. Low music drifted from a lounge on the left. Voices murmured behind closed doors. Charlotte's pulse hammered in her ears as she ventured down a short hallway toward a private lounge. She paused near a frosted glass door left slightly ajar. Inside, she heard it, a voice she instantly recognized as Frederick's, and Dahlia's gentle laughter. Her body shook with adrenaline. She positioned herself in the corridor, peeking through the gap. Dahlia sat on a plush sofa, sipping what looked like a martini. Frederick stood near her, one hand resting on the edge of the sofa, the other running through his hair in agitation. "What are we doing, Frederick?" Dahlia said quietly. "You told me we'd figure this out once you returned from your last trip. Then you surprised me with this cruise invitation. And now you're acting like you don't want to be seen with me. I'm not a toy you can pick up and put down at your convenience." Frederick muttered a curse under his breath. "I can't just walk away from Charlotte. Not now. She's pregnant with my child, Dahlia." Dahlia scoffed. "I know that, but you've had no problem walking away from me repeatedly, whenever it suits your public image. You think I haven't noticed you ignoring my calls, my messages?" The tension in the air was palpable. Charlotte strained to hear more, her heart both shattered and enraged. Frederick had been involved with Dahlia for months, it seemed. The timeline flickered in Charlotte's mind. The nights he claimed to be on business trips, the hushed phone calls, the times he came home too exhausted to talk or even look at her. Frederick let out a ragged breath. "I told you, the timing is bad. If Charlotte finds out about us now, everything explodes. My brand, my reputation, more importantly, I don't want to hurt her. She's carrying my child. I never expected that." Dahlia stood up abruptly, her eyes blazing. "Spare me your concern. This is about you preserving your public image. You're afraid of what this scandal would do to your name and your company. You're terrified of losing everything you worked for, more than you're scared of losing me or hurting Charlotte." Her words stung Charlotte as much as they likely stung Frederick. Frederick glowered, failing to produce any immediate denial. In that moment, Charlotte had heard enough. Her devastation morphed into a surge of furious clarity. She could not allow Frederick to keep playing both sides, to treat her pregnancy as a mere inconvenience to his double life. Summoning her courage, she pushed open the door, stepping into the lounge. A gasp escaped Dahlia's lips. Frederick spun around, shock contorting his face. Charlotte stood there, fists clenched at her sides. Though her knees wobbled, she held her ground, unwavering. "Don't stop on my account," she said, voice trembling with fury. "I'd like to hear exactly what you're going to do, now that I've found out about your affair." An eerie silence enveloped the room. Dahlia's face went pale, and Frederick stood like a statue, apparently too stunned to speak. Charlotte didn't wait for him to compose himself. She turned her fiery gaze on Dahlia first. "You come on this ship, carrying on an affair with a married man whose wife is pregnant. You must have a lot of nerve or no conscience at all." The color drained from Dahlia's cheeks, and for a moment she looked genuinely remorseful. "Charlotte, this wasn't how I planned, how you planned it." Charlotte's voice grew louder. "How dare you think you have any right to plan anything when it comes to my husband and me?" Dahlia winced, shoulders slumping. She looked away, seemingly at a loss for words. Then Charlotte shifted her focus to Frederick, who still hadn't uttered a syllable. "And you," she spat, tears of rage forming in her eyes. "The man who held my hand at every prenatal appointment, who told me we were going to raise this child together in a loving home. You lied to me, Fred. You've been lying for months, haven't you?" Frederick found his voice, though it shook. "Charlotte, please, just hear me out." "Hear you out?" She laughed bitterly, swiping at the tears coursing down her cheeks. "What could you possibly say to fix this? That you love us both? That you can't decide? I overheard you on the deck last night, Fred. I've seen and heard everything I need to." Dahlia, seeming to prefer flight over fight, edged toward the door. "I didn't want to cause this much pain. I fell in love with him. I should go." She cast Frederick a searching look, as if hoping he would stop her. He didn't. As Dahlia fled, Charlotte and Frederick faced each other. Charlotte's tears now flowed freely, anger mixing with heartbreak. Frederick reached out, but she recoiled. "Don't touch me," she whispered, seething. "You don't get to pretend we can fix this in a night. I can't even look at you without feeling ill." Frederick's shoulders slumped. His eyes, usually so confident, darted everywhere as if searching for an escape. "I never meant for this to happen," he said. "I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. I couldn't figure out how to end it without hurting her or you. Then you told me you were pregnant, and everything got more complicated." Charlotte closed her eyes, attempting to steady her breathing. "So you decided to keep me in the dark? You decided my feelings didn't matter? You risked the health of our baby by dragging me on this farce of a romantic cruise, just so you could sneak away to see Dahlia?" Frederick's eyes welled with tears. "I'm sorry, Charlotte. I know I messed up. Please, can we just go back to the suite and talk about this in private?" She took a step back, wrapping her arms around her belly in a protective gesture. "I'm done talking. I need time. Space." She turned on her heel and left the lounge, leaving Frederick behind. Charlotte stumbled back to their suite, her mind a whirlwind. She wanted to pack her bags and leave immediately, but the ship was still en route to the Bahamas, not due to dock until the next morning. She paced the living area, tears streaming, unsure what to do. Frederick texted her once, then again. She ignored him. After hours of agonized waiting, the ship finally arrived at its port in Nassau. Charlotte hurriedly disembarked, too numb and furious to care about the lavish cabin they were leaving behind. She dragged her suitcase alone through the terminal, ignoring the spectacle it created when passers-by recognized her as Frederick Donovan's wife. She refused to let shame or heartbreak paralyze her. She needed to protect herself and her unborn child, no matter what. She booked a flight out of Nassau to New York City, ignoring Frederick's frantic calls. She had arranged, through quick internet searching, to stay at a hotel near the airport before catching a connection back home to Baltimore, where her parents lived. The moment she arrived at the small airport lounge in the Bahamas, Charlotte's phone buzzed incessantly. "Frederick, please, talk to me. Frederick, I'm sorry. Let me fix this. Frederick, we have to work this out for the baby." Charlotte wanted to throw her phone across the lounge. Every beep was a fresh wound in her heart. She turned it off to preserve her peace. The flight to New York felt like a blur, tears coming in waves, her thoughts consumed with uncertainty for her future. She was about to become a mother, but the father of her child had just proven himself a manipulator, a traitor. By the time she landed, her eyes burned from crying. She pressed a hand to her stomach, whispering silent reassurances to the life inside her. Once she reached her hotel, she collapsed onto the bed, letting the exhaustion take over. The next morning, she switched her phone on to see voicemails and messages, not only from Frederick, but also from her mother, best friends, and even Frederick's personal assistant. Gossip must have already reached the tabloids. She dreaded the thought of the scandal unraveling in public, but at that point, she could hardly care about the media. She cared only about her emotional health and her baby's well-being. When Charlotte finally called her parents, she broke down the moment she heard her mother's voice. She explained everything in a tearful rush, the romantic cruise that became a living nightmare, Frederick's affair, her desperate escape. Her mother's immediate response was unwavering compassion and support. They insisted she come home, that they would make space for her until she figured out her next move. Charlotte agreed, booking the earliest flight to Baltimore. Outside the airport, camera flashes erupted. Paparazzi somehow tipped off, rushed toward her, hurling questions about Frederick and the alleged mistress. Charlotte pulled her hood up, heart thundering. Security personnel intervened, ushering her through the crowd. She hated every moment of it, feeling utterly violated and exposed. The next few days at her parents' home felt surreal. Her old bedroom, with its pastel walls and collection of stuffed animals, became her refuge. She clung to the familiarity, trying to block out the chaos of her married life unraveling. Frederick tried calling countless times, leaving voicemails that ranged from apologies to pleas to borderline accusations, suggesting she was overreacting. Charlotte ignored them all. One evening, a new voice called Patricia, Frederick's mother. Charlotte felt a wave of apprehension but picked up. Patricia, usually quite formal, spoke with surprising gentleness. She claimed she had no idea about Frederick's indiscretion. She apologized for her son's actions and expressed genuine concern for Charlotte's health. But Charlotte sensed an undercurrent in Patricia's tone, one that feared scandal, public humiliation, and damage to the Donovan name. Charlotte ended the call feeling both slightly comforted and more resolute that this was not a simple family issue that could be swept under the rug. Meanwhile, tabloids ran headlines like "Billionaire Frederick Donovan's Weekend Cruise Affair Exposed." Some articles showed grainy photos of Frederick with Dahlia, leaning close on the ship's deck. Others featured Charlotte's teary face as she tried to exit the Bahamas airport. The world buzzed with speculation about how the revered entrepreneur had betrayed his pregnant wife. After a week of silence, Frederick himself arrived in Baltimore, surprising Charlotte by showing up unannounced at her parents' doorstep. Her mother answered the door, refusing to let him in until Charlotte agreed to speak with him. Summoning her courage, she stepped outside to face him on the porch. Frederick appeared haggard, his usual crisp suit wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes. He tried to speak, but Charlotte's glare turned his words into stammers. "I just want to talk, Charlotte," he pleaded. "I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But this is our marriage, our child. We can't just walk away." She crossed her arms, feeling a protective surge. You gave up that right when you deceived me and carried on with Dahlia. I ended it, Frederick insisted, voice low. After you left the ship, I confronted Dahlia. I told her I couldn't continue like this. It was wrong from the start. You have to believe me. Charlotte studied him, searching for any flicker of manipulation. Even if that's true, it doesn't erase the betrayal. I don't trust you anymore. Frederick's voice trembled with desperation. I'll do whatever it takes. Therapy, couples counseling, anything. I'll sign a postnuptial agreement if that helps you feel secure. I can't lose my family over a terrible mistake. Part of Charlotte wanted to break down, to let him hold her, to preserve the dream of a happy family for the child growing inside her. But the memory of his lies was still too raw. I need time, she said. I can't just pretend it never happened. And if you're serious about righting your wrongs, you need to prove it with actions, not words. He nodded, eyes glistening. I understand. I'll wait as long as it takes. In the weeks following Frederick's return, Donovan Holdings faced a series of critical blows. News of his affair had not only tarnished his personal reputation, but also put him at odds with key business partners. A major European investment firm backed out of a significant deal. Stocks dipped, causing shareholders to panic. Public perception shifted. Once seen as a philanthropic visionary, Frederick now appeared tainted by scandal. When the dust settled, Frederick found that the board of Donovan Holdings had convened an emergency meeting. Several members voiced their concerns about his judgment and decision-making. The personal scandal, combined with rumors of a financial misstep in the Tokyo deal, created an atmosphere of distrust. Frederick's once invincible aura began to crumble. Media outlets reported his net worth dropping as he scrambled to salvage the company. He retreated into crisis management mode, barely sleeping as he flew between major cities, trying to placate investors and board members. Charlotte watched from afar, torn by conflicting emotions. Part of her felt vindicated, seeing that the pain he had caused her would not go without consequences. Another part of her, the one that remembered their happiest times, ached for him. During her pregnancy, stress took a toll on Charlotte. She developed complications that her doctor attributed partly to anxiety. Determined to protect her health, she minimized her interactions with the outside world. She tried to focus on prenatal yoga, healthy eating, and reading about motherhood. Occasional updates reached her through mutual friends or the news. She learned of Frederick's plummeting fortune and how Dahlia Gray's fledgling fashion line had also come under scrutiny, with negative press tarnishing her brand. Finally, with a few months left in her pregnancy, Charlotte decided she needed closure. Frederick had been bombarding her with messages about starting fresh. He claimed to have cut ties with Dahlia, to have come clean to his board about personal failings, and to be in therapy. Charlotte mulled over whether to file for divorce immediately or give him a chance to prove redemption. She invited Frederick to a neutral location, a small cafe in Baltimore, where they once shared a quiet brunch early in their relationship. She arrived first, settling into a seat by the window. Rain pattered softly against the glass. Her heart pounded as she saw Frederick step out of a car, shoulders hunched against the drizzle. He looked thinner, wearier. When he entered, his eyes went straight to her. He approached hesitantly, waiting for her to gesture at the seat opposite her. They sat in uncomfortable silence until the waiter arrived. Frederick ordered tea. Charlotte asked for water. "I'm glad you agreed to see me," he said, voice subdued. She inhaled slowly, laying a hand over her growing belly. "I'm not making any promises. I needed to see who you are now, whether there's any truth to what you've been telling me." Frederick nodded. "I'm in therapy twice a week. I ended things with Dahlia. Told my mother, the board, everyone that my actions nearly cost me the one thing that matters more than anything else in the world, you and our child. I'm prepared to step down as CEO if it helps restore faith in the company and in me as a husband. Charlotte studied his expression. She saw regret etched into every line of his face. Do you really think stepping down will help? Donovan Holdings is your life's work. He shrugged, eyes filling with sorrow. It was my life's work. Now, my life's work is to repair what I broke. I don't expect you to trust me easily, but I'll do whatever it takes to prove I'm serious. If you want me to sell the company, I'll do it. The sincerity in his voice tugged at her battered heart. I never wanted to ruin your dreams, she murmured. I just wanted to build a life with you, a real, honest life. The two talked for hours, traversing the full scope of emotions: anger, heartbreak, hope, fear. By the time the cafe closed, they had reached a tentative agreement. Charlotte would move back into the penthouse on a trial basis, on the condition that Frederick remained in therapy and fully transparent about his activities. They would also begin couples counseling. Frederick, for his part, pledged to do anything Charlotte asked. He reassured her that Dahlia was out of the picture for good. As Charlotte's due date approached, Frederick kept his word. He stepped back from many of his roles, letting a trusted coup handle day-to-day operations. He surrendered all passcodes and personal accounts to Charlotte's scrutiny. He never objected to her spontaneous checks of his phone. Their couple's counselor guided them through hours of painful discussions, forcing Frederick to reveal layers of secrecy, from old business escapades to the beginnings of his affair with Dahlia. It was not an easy road. Charlotte found herself lashing out in sessions, sobbing uncontrollably as she recounted the moment on the cruise ship deck when she overheard their conversation. Frederick accepted her wrath, admitting over and over that he had made an unforgivable mistake. With time, Charlotte's anger softened just enough to let seeds of compassion sprout. She recognized that for the sake of her child, who deserved a father as well as a mother, she needed to see if Frederick could truly change. On a crisp autumn evening, Charlotte went into labor. Frederick rushed her to the hospital, breathing heavily as he tried to calm her. Hours later, their daughter, Grace Olivia Donovan, arrived with a tiny wail. Charlotte held the newborn in her arms, tears of awe and relief coursing down her cheeks. Frederick stood beside her, equally overcome. In that moment, neither the affair nor the heartbreak was at the forefront of their minds. The helpless, perfect infant was all that mattered. For a few weeks, they lived in a cocoon of new parenthood. Frederick was doting and attentive, waking for late-night feedings, changing diapers with surprising ease. The tabloids had moved on to a new scandal, giving them some breathing room. Donovan Holdings slowly stabilized under the new executive structure. It appeared that Frederick had found a way to balance fatherhood with business obligations without letting secrecy creep back into his life. But the wound of betrayal does not simply vanish with the arrival of a baby. Charlotte struggled with nightmares, trust issues, and pangs of jealousy whenever Frederick left for a meeting. She read Dahlia's name in random online articles, her heart clenching every time. She wondered if she could ever truly feel safe in this marriage again. Frederick, for his part, continued therapy, using every opportunity to apologize or reassure her. He coaxed her out for date nights, sometimes just a quiet walk in the city park with Grace in a stroller. He wrote her letters, expressing his guilt and regret, describing the darkest hours of his life, the shame of losing her respect, the fear that he'd destroyed their family. Gradually, she allowed him small steps back into her heart. The nights spent feeding and rocking Grace, while Frederick whispered silly lullabies in her ear, showed Charlotte a gentler side of him, one capable of immense devotion. He did not hesitate to sign a postnuptial agreement, effectively promising that if he cheated again or filed for divorce for any reason relating to infidelity, Charlotte would be entitled to a significant portion of his assets. The gesture was a statement of seriousness, giving Charlotte a financial safety net. In the months that followed, Frederick faced ongoing repercussions for his past deceit. Some old partners refused to trust him. Dahlia, in a last-ditch effort to resurrect her brand, gave an exclusive interview painting Frederick as a manipulator who had led her on with false promises. The story threatened to reignite the scandal, but ironically, it only garnered sympathy for Charlotte. Dahlia admitted she had known Frederick was married. She tried to shift blame, but the public viewed her as complicit in the affair. Frederick resigned from the position of CEO, handing the reins to the coup. He remained on the board, but with significantly less influence. This was the price he paid for his transgressions, stepping away from the empire he had built. Yet, in so doing, he discovered a new focus: parenthood. He started small charities under the Donovan name, focusing on prenatal care and support for single mothers, possibly out of a desire to rectify what he had nearly wrecked in Charlotte's life. In the eyes of many, Frederick Donovan had received his hard karma. The unstoppable tycoon was humbled by scandal, forced to reconstruct his life from the ground up. But in so doing, he had a chance to become a better man, and Charlotte cautiously allowed herself to believe he just might succeed. A year passed after Grace's birth, and Charlotte found herself in a place she never expected, still married to Frederick, still living with him, but forging a new dynamic. The memory of his betrayal lingered, yet she could not deny that he had evolved. The atmosphere in their penthouse felt different, less about high-profile parties, more about intimate family dinners, bedtime stories, and personal growth. Frederick had discovered that being present with Charlotte and Grace offered a fulfillment no business deal could match. On their second wedding anniversary, technically third, though Charlotte chose not to count the year marred by the affair, Frederick planned a small, private celebration in the Hamptons. This time, rather than a gala brimming with celebrities, it was a simple gathering with close family and a few dear friends. Charlotte's parents came, as did Frederick's mother, and they marveled at Grace toddling around the garden. During the evening, Frederick slipped away with Charlotte to the very spot where he had once waltzed with her beneath the stars. The memory was bittersweet, but now Charlotte saw a man willing to learn from his sins rather than conceal them. Under the soft glow of hanging lanterns, Frederick took Charlotte's hand. "I will spend the rest of my life trying to make up for the damage I caused," he said. "I know I can't change the past, but I want you to know I'll never stop fighting for our future." Charlotte met his gaze, remembering the heartbreak, yet also acknowledging the love that refused to die. "I don't know if I can ever truly forget," she said softly, "but I'm beginning to forgive. That's a start." He pulled her gently into his arms. Against the music of crickets and lapping waves, they swayed. The old illusions of perfection were gone, replaced by something far more grounded, the reality that love can endure only if both parties fight for it with absolute honesty. Sometimes life demands we unravel at the seams before finding the courage to stitch ourselves back together. Charlotte's story reminds us that betrayal can strike, even in the glow of what seems like a perfect marriage. Yet, it is within that very darkness that resilience and second chances can take root. Her journey through heartbreak, fury, and eventual guarded forgiveness testifies to the strength of a love determined to survive. If you're moved by tales of triumph emerging from tragedy, or by the power of redemption in relationships, consider showing your support. Hit the like button, share this story with others who might need hope, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that illuminate the raw intricacies of the human heart. Let Charlotte's path remind us that even the greatest storms can yield new horizons for those who dare to try again.